One of the biggest reasons why golfers don't hit their irons as far as they'd like to is not to do with the fact that they're swinging too slow, it's to do with it not compressing the golf ball correctly. Now the reason why they wouldn't be compressing the ball correctly is because as they come into impact, their hands are behind the club head as opposed to leading the club head through impact. Now when the hands are behind the club head like so, we're going to be adding loft, we're going to be reducing how much we're hitting down on the golf ball, meaning we're not going to get that compressed penetrating strike that we'd be after, which is going to help us get more distance with our irons. Now in this video, I'm going to take you through the 3 biggest faults I see in golfers that causes this issue, as well as some drills that you can do to help you fix them. First of all, let's just understand, what is compression really? Well, compression is the action of where when we're hitting the ball with our irons, that we are hitting down on it with a negative angle of attack and we are de-lofting it. In other words, whatever loft we have on the club when it's static like so, we're taking some of that off as we strike the golf ball. Now when you do this, this creates a much higher ball speed off the club face, meaning the ball is going to travel further. That's one of the reasons why you may play with people who seem to be swinging it slower than you, but are managing to knock it past you by 10, 15, 20 yards. It's down to the idea that because the hands are leading more, we're taking loft off, we're hitting down on the golf ball, which means we're starting to get more ball speed and start hitting the irons further. And the issue is for the golfers who aren't doing that, is that very simply they're getting the club head passing the hands too early in the golf swing, adding on loft, reducing ball speed, and ultimately reducing distance. Now it's really important to understand that in every single golf swing, we do have to have a throw, if you like. In other words, when we take the club back in a golf swing, we create an angle between the lead arm and the shaft, and we need to line this lever back up through the golf ball. In other words, the club head does have to match back up with the lead arm at some point in the golf swing. Now for golfers who struggle with that early release, that scoop, and ultimately that lack of compression, what they're doing is they're lining this thing back up too early in the golf swing. So if we want to get that compressed strike, we need to ensure that we line it up later. What you'll see in good ball strikers is that the shaft and the lead arm will line up after the strike as opposed to before it. So that takes us quite nicely into our first fault that I see that causes people to struggle with compression, and that is to do with their weight shift. Now, when we shift our weight in the golf swing, as we strike the golf ball, ideally we want to have our weight beyond the golf ball like so. What this is doing is this is pushing the bottom of the golf swing after the golf ball, meaning that the throw is happening later. So as a quick example here, if I were to make a swing, and as I start moving down, I stay on my trail side, I keep my weight on my back foot, I get to a point now where I have to get to the club to the ball somehow, and that typically means unloading and lining the shaft back up with the lead arm to try and catch the golf ball. There is your scoop. In good ball strikers, what we'll see is that the weight is moved forward and the throw happens later. So by getting the throw to happen later, what we're doing is we're getting to a scenario where as we come into impact, the hands are leading the club head into the strike, we're hitting down, we're taking loft off, and we're compressing the golf ball a lot better. Now for most golfers who struggle with their weight shift, it's a simple issue of sequencing. So for this drill we're going to do is the step drill. And what we're looking to do with this step drill is we're looking to encourage a movement where the lower body leads the downswing, getting the weight onto the lead foot so we can have that later throw. So the step drill, very simply, we're going to take our normal setup. We're then going to place the front foot next to the trail foot. We're going to swing up. We're then going to step back to where we started. So that's that kind of initiating phase of getting the weight forward. And then we're going to swing through. So look a bit like this. Now you can do that with and without a golf ball to get the sensation beforehand. But what we're ultimately trying to time up is that we get the weight moving forward into the lead side and then we throw the club through, as opposed to many golfers who will, from the top, not get the weight forward, hang on the back foot, and then ultimately have to throw too early in order to reach the golf ball. Now the second fault that I see that leads to this scoop action or lack of compression is to do with the club face. Now very commonly players who struggle with that early release, it's usually they're trying to fix a problem, and the problem would be a weak club face. So if we have a player who, as they move in their backswing or as they reach the top of their backswing, they have a weaker club face, i.e. the face is more likely to point out to the right as they come into the golf ball, they're not going to leave the club face there. They're going to try and do something to get that club face back pointing towards the target. Now you see two options from here typically. Some golfers with a weaker club face will be more inclined to rotate the upper body too aggressively, moving the club outwards in an attempt to swing it more left across the golf ball. That would be your over-the-top golfers. But you also get golfers who, from the top, tend to try and throw out the angles early. In other words, line the shaft back up with the lead arm early in an attempt to get the club face back around square. Doing that is almost creating another problem to solve a problem. So in order to solve the open club face, we then remove any sort of chance of having the handle forward and creating that compressed strike. So we're fixing a problem with another problem. So for this one, we need to look at a couple of things to make sure that we're not making our job harder for ourselves from the top of the backswing. So the first thing when we look at a weak club face is to double check your grip. Now be sure to head back to my channel, check out the video I did on gripping the club correctly to help you with your slice, as that will be really helpful for understanding what we need there. But then the other piece I'd like to look at is how players tend to move through their trail arm in the backswing. So many players who get a weaker club at the top of their backswing usually are moving their trail arm, so the right arm for a right-hander, in a way that is forcing them to get that lead wrist cupped at the top of the backswing, which in turn is going to weaken the club face. The fault would be as they move back, they start to pull their trail arm in behind them like so. Now this is usually down to a lack of rotation in the backswing, so the player's trying to get the club up to the top. They do so by pulling the trail arm behind them, but as they pull the trail arm in behind them, we typically know we're going to try and get the club up to the top. The way we do this is keeping that left wrist more cupped, as it's quite difficult to flex the lead wrist whilst doing this movement, and so we get that weak club face, and then from there we're kickstarting the sequence of having to try and square the face up with that early release. So the drill for this one is what I call the long arm drill. It's very simply, as the name suggests, we're going to be hitting shots, keeping our arms as long as possible, with a particular focus here on how we're moving that trail arm. So as opposed to just pulling the trail arm in behind us, when we make this backswing, we're going to feel as though we keep the trail arm on top of the club for as long as possible. Now, when you do this, you'll find yourself very restricted in your backswing motion, because now I've basically taken away this whole bend. But as you do this, the club face will remain a lot more shut on the way back, like so, meaning now that because I don't have an issue with the club face being opened, I'm actually able to start shifting and turning forward and avoid having to early release. If I did do that with this closed club face, I would start seeing that ball sailing down the left-hand side aggressively. So hitting shots where we keep the right arm more on top, the right elbow staying above the left elbow, and the club face looking more down to the ground like so, and simply hitting short swing or half swing shots from there with that sensation of the club face being stronger. Now the final fault that I see that causes players to want to scoop or early release is to do with under rotation in the downswing or excessive trail side tilt, essentially dropping too much to the trail side in the downswing. Now this problem often comes from players who are either trying to get away from slicing the golf ball coming over the top, so they desperately try to swing the club hard out to the right, or you'll see golfers who struggle with a hook doing this as well. Now, when we look at a golf swing in the downswing, we certainly need some amount of trail side bend, in other words, tilting to the right side, but that needs to be matched up with rotation to ensure that we are bringing the club back out in front of us, which is going to be a huge part of getting the handle forward and getting that compressed strike. Players who would struggle with this issue of dropping too much to the trail side without rotation essentially are dropping their hands too far behind them here, meaning that from here now, how am I going to get the club to the golf ball and square everything up? I'm going to have to start throwing things early, meaning that I'm not going to be able to compress the golf ball as I would like to do. So encouraging more rotation through the upper body in the downswing, or the body in general through the downswing, as well as a little bit of moving the arms outwards and around the body, is going to be super effective for players who struggle with this issue and in turn to scoop in the golf ball. So the drill I like to use for these players is what I like to call the kickstand drill. So what we're going to be doing is getting to a set position where we place our big toe of the trail foot on our lead foot ankle bone like so. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the club up to the top, and then from here encouraging a lowering down of the arms into the strike. So from a face on view, from the top, lowering down the arms into and through the strike. So we're getting two wins here, because as I rep this movement, You'll notice that, of course, I'm bringing my hands more around the body, more back in front of me if you'd like, which of course is going to make it easier for me to get the handle further forward. But I'm also doing that by rotating more through the upper body as opposed to dropping into that trail side. Now you'll be very surprised how far you can hit that shot when you're doing that kickstand drill. And this is something that whenever I do this drill with clients, the question always comes out, can I play golf like that? Because it just develops such a good strike because of the fact that we're getting everything more around the body, handle further forward, downward strike, and taking some loft off the club, producing those much more compressed iron shots. So in summary, if you want to start getting more compression and hitting your irons further, keep an eye out for 3 big things. Number 1, we need to ensure that we are moving the weight forward so that we can delay the throw or delay the release. Number 2, make sure you've got a strong enough club face so that we're not panic releasing, trying to get the club face around to stop it going miles out to the right. And finally, number 3, let's ensure we've got enough rotation in the downswing with the body so the arms don't get sucked in and drop behind us, leading to the scoop. When you start getting those 3 things in place, you'll find that you start creating shaft lean without even having to try and do it. You'll be creating it just by the mechanics of the swing alone, as opposed to trying to desperately hold on to the angle all the way through the strike, and that's where you'll start getting your real compression. So if you found this helpful, please hit like and subscribe to see my future videos. And if you want more help with your game, be sure to head to my website, hwgolf.co.uk, where you'll find yourself a free practice plan and even a free swing analysis where I'll break down your swing for you completely free of charge and let you know what key areas you need to be working on to start improving your golf swing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.